Tonight we drift toward a world lit by living light. From a distance, its colors shift slowly across the surface, shaped by enormous glowing organisms floating through its skies. Every movement they make changes the landscape below. Hills, lakes, valleys and plains all shifting through gentle waves of pink, gold and green. We'll move through its atmosphere and follow the glow across quiet basins, ridges and wide reflective plains. Nothing here is loud or sudden. Everything works in long cycles of color, responding to the lantern creatures drifting overhead. Settle in, get comfortable, and let the world unfold at its own steady pace. From space, the planet is immediately unusual because of the colors moving across it. Large patches of pink, green and gold slide over the surface in slow, steady paths. At first glance, it looks like a world covered in shifting, luminous clouds. As the view gets closer, the source of those colors becomes obvious. Immense balloon-like organisms drifting high in the atmosphere, each glowing from within. Some glow constantly, others pulse in long, slow waves. Their colors spill downward, washing over continents and lakes. They drift in long chains, sometimes clustering, sometimes spreading apart, carried by broad, stable wind currents. Their glow is strong enough to tint entire regions at a time. Entering the upper atmosphere brings a soft change in pressure. The haze here is lightly colored, carrying faint dust-like particles released by the lantern creatures above. They catch small amounts of light and create a gentle tint through the air. The atmosphere feels thick but manageable, the kind that slows falling objects rather than creating turbulence. As the descent continues, the floating organisms become clearer. Some span hundreds of meters, their membranes stretched thin like natural film, reinforced by long strands that hold their shapes. Beneath them, gas-filled chambers shift constantly, adjusting their buoyancy. Their colors come from internal chemical reactions that spread through their bodies, lighting them from the inside out. Others are smaller, clusters of dozens drifting together at lower altitudes. They move almost silently. Occasionally one rotates or tilts to adjust its lift, revealing brighter patches on its surface. Hanging tendrils sway beneath some of the larger individuals, tracing arcs through the air as they drift. Sound enters the picture gradually. A deep ambient hum moves through the atmosphere, shaped by wide plains far below. Some of the largest lantern creatures produce long, hollow vibrations when the air pushes against them. There's no sharp noise anywhere. Everything spreads out and fades smoothly over distance. Breaking through the lower cloud layers reveals the surface in full detail. Hills stretch out in long, rolling waves, covered in low, shimmering vegetation. These plants don't simply reflect color, they react to it. When a lantern passes overhead, the vegetation catches the glow and releases a softer version of the same hue a moment later. It turns every change in the sky into a second wave of light moving across the ground. Forests rise in tall, slender shapes, each trunk smooth and pale. Their upper growths absorb light immediately, holding color for a few seconds before letting it escape in long golden bands that drift upward like heated air. The effect makes the forest look alive with slow, controlled illumination. The air carries a faint metallic scent with a mild sweetness beneath it. Falling particles from the lantern creatures mix into the atmosphere, drifting like dust. They don't cling to surfaces. They stay suspended, spreading color through the air whenever a strong glow passes overhead. Reaching the base of a valley introduces a better sense of scale. A massive lantern creature moves above, wide enough to blanket the entire region beneath in a steady gold light. Its underside shows branching veins filled with brighter liquid-like color, pulsing slowly along its length. Those long tendrils hanging beneath it drag through the air, influencing the wind in subtle spirals. The lakes react instantly to every passing color. When a green lantern dips low, the water shifts into a bright green mirror. When the lantern rises, the lake returns to muted tones within seconds. Wind doesn't disturb it much. The air density here keeps ripples shallow, almost lazy. Light behaves strangely across the surface. It bends more than expected, softening shadows and stretching them in unpredictable directions. Some areas have almost no shadow at all because multiple colored lights overlap. Even at midday, the atmosphere never feels overly bright. Everything is diffused, spread out, and layered. Small creatures move through the vegetation with quick, light steps. Their passing triggers short-lived glows along the plants, reactions to motion or heat. The glows fade quickly, leaving no trace. The creatures themselves are disc-shaped, gliding low to the ground with short, flexible legs that can retract when they jump. Further in the distance, broader forms rise slowly from the ground. Shell-like structures lift themselves on sturdy stalks, turning slightly toward the brightest lantern in the sky. Their surfaces shift from grey to pearly white depending on the color passing over them. They move with purpose, but at a pace shaped by the thick atmosphere and the steady drift of light. More lantern creatures approach from the horizon, glowing in soft orange. As they slide overhead, the entire region fades into warm amber. Forests respond with deeper gold. Lakes reflect bronze. The land changes tone within moments. Walking forward, the ground feels cushioned by layers of soft growth. The atmosphere slows every movement. Nothing rushes, nothing snaps. Even footsteps seem padded by the thickness of the air. It creates a natural calmness in the environment, not forced, just built into the physics of the place. A smaller lantern creature drifts down toward the surface, no larger than a beach ball. Its membrane is almost transparent, showing swirling internal gases. It follows heat signatures, wobbling slightly as it hovers. After a moment, it rises again, slowly drifting toward a larger group, moving along a gentle current. Ahead, several ridges rise in long arcs, glowing in the gold light of a distant lantern high above. The transitions between colors stretch across the landscape, not sharp lines, but slow gradients. The sky shifts from gold to green to soft pink, depending on where each floating organism moves. Nothing stays static. The colors above and below shift minute by minute as the lantern creatures follow their wind patterns. Once night arrives, the entire sky will turn into a moving field of drifting lights, each one alive, each one carrying its own steady glow across the darkness. The land settles into another quiet moment. No major movement overhead, no sudden color changes, just the steady presence of drifting light moving somewhere far beyond the next ridge. The landscape ahead begins to open into a wide basin shaped by long, sloping walls that carry faint streaks of color down their sides. The glow overhead is mostly green at the moment, cast by several large lantern creatures drifting together in a loose formation. Their combined light spreads across the basin like a soft blanket, tinting everything with the same steady hue. Moving down the slope reveals how the ground reacts to different light levels. When the glow intensifies, the plants here brighten slightly, almost like they're absorbing energy and releasing it back. When the light fades, the plants dim at the same pace. Everything operates on a calm, predictable cycle tied directly to the lanterns drifting above. At the bottom of the basin, the terrain becomes smooth and layered. Broad sheets of flat, sturdy plant growth overlap like natural tiles. They shift slightly underweight, not enough to unsettle footing, but enough to hint that the surface is alive in some slow biological way. Small gaps between the layers breathe out faint, warm air, showing that something underneath generates heat or circulates gases upward. One of the larger lantern creatures begins to descend nearby. Not rapidly. Nothing here moves rapidly, but enough to bring its underside closer to the basin. Its membrane is clearer at this altitude. Wide internal chambers glow like suspended liquids trapped inside a thin shell. When gas shifts within it, the color deepens, spreading through its body like a slow tide. A low vibration travels through the air as it drops further, steady and controlled, almost like the sound of thick fabric moving in wind. Beneath it, a subtle movement stirs across the ground. Small organisms tucked into the layered surface begin emerging. They're shaped like rounded cones with soft, flexible skin. Each one rises only halfway before stopping, turning slowly as if sensing the light intensity above. When the lantern creature's glow strengthens, they lift a little higher. When it fades, they sink back into the ground with quiet, almost coordinated timing. Across the basin, a wide lake settles into a jade-colored surface under the green light. Its stillness is striking. No waves, no ripples beyond faint circular spreads triggered by drifting particles falling onto it. The thickness of the atmosphere damps almost all motion, leaving the water as flat as polished stone. As the lanterns shift position in the sky, their reflections trail behind them, leaving long streaks of fading green. A faint sound rises from the far side of the water. Not a call or cry, more like the steady exhale of air being pushed through hollow structures. Several tall, narrow growths stand along the bank, similar to reeds but far larger, some reaching 15 or 20 meters into the air. When the light brightens, the reeds flex slightly and release long, low tones. The pitch shifts depending on the color overhead, giving the impression that the entire shoreline responds to the lanterns like a slow-moving instrument. Past the lake, the terrain climbs again into irregular ridges formed from tightly packed growths. These are tougher and rock-like, but still organic. Their surfaces host thin streaks of bioluminescence that switch on slowly as the sky dims behind the passing lantern group. They mark the edges of the path naturally, glowing like guides without any deliberate pattern. Higher up, the air grows warmer. The reason becomes clear a moment later: heat vents. Long cracks in the ridge exhale steady streams of warm air carrying faint sparks of color. These vents respond to lantern proximity as well. When a particularly bright one passes overhead, the vents release slightly more heat, as though the lantern's glow affects temperature variations underground. A small lantern creature, barely the size of a person, drifts low enough to skim the top of the ridge. Its tendrils trail behind it like threads. Some brush the bioluminescent streaks along the surface, causing each touched patch to flare brighter before fading again. The creature seems unaffected by gravity here, buoyed by thick air and internal gases. It drifts with small adjustments, following invisible air currents that move around the ridge. As the climb continues, the color in the sky begins to shift again. The large green lanterns start drifting apart, leaving gaps between them where ambient light dims. In those gaps, pale pink begins to leak across the sky from a distant group of lantern creatures moving steadily toward this region. Their approach doesn't create any urgency in the landscape. Everything simply adapts gradually. From the top of the ridge, a wide valley stretches out below. This one is deeper than the basin before it, with a long serpentine lake cutting through the center. The water is darker here, reacting differently to color changes. Where lantern light hits it directly, it brightens, but when the light shifts off, the lake dims far faster than the shallower basin lake did. It suggests greater depth or some property in the water that absorbs light more quickly. Clusters of tall structures rise from parts of the valley floor. At first they look like trees, but closer inspection shows smoother surfaces, more like towers grown from hardened plant material. Each tower ends in a wide cup-like opening facing upward. When stray particles fall from overhead lantern creatures, the cups briefly glow from within, suggesting some sort of chemical interaction. Movement stirs at the base of the towers. Small, gliding organisms flock around them, sliding across the ground in swift arcs. Their bodies emit a faint glow of their own, not strong enough to compete with the lanterns above, but noticeable against the dim landscape. They appear to be feeding on particles collected near the tower bases, breaking them down and leaving behind dim trails that vanish after a few seconds. The pink lantern group drifts closer, coloring the valley in a soft blush. The towers respond immediately. The cups on top shift gently, tilting toward the brightest lantern. Inside each cup, glowing streaks begin to spread like veins, lighting up. It appears to be a reaction to specific wavelengths, as not all lantern colors cause this effect. Pink seems to activate them more strongly than green or gold. The deeper into the valley one goes, the more noticeable the temperature change becomes. This region is warmer, with thicker air carrying a mild humidity. The plant life here reacts faster to color changes, brightening almost instantly as lantern light shifts overhead. Areas near the lake hold their brightness longer, suggesting that water plays a role in storing some of the glow before releasing it back slowly. Far ahead, where the valley narrows, a broad curtain of floating particles hangs in the air. They shimmer in layered colors, drifting like a slow waterfall suspended in place. These particles fall from a group of lantern creatures that hover just above this point, releasing material in steady amounts. The particles don't fall fast. They drift, bounce on air currents, and occasionally settle before rising again. Stepping through them would likely tint clothing or skin in temporary colors, though they don't seem harmful. Even the gliding animals pass through them without hesitation. The pink lanterns finally pass directly overhead. Their glow washes across the terrain, shifting everything into soft, warm tones. Hills blush lightly, towers glow internally, and the lake surface turns into a long sheet of pale rose light. The whole valley settles into a steady balance again as the lanterns continue their drift, following air currents beyond the far ridge. And the world holds quiet once more, allowing the colors to fade into the next transition. The valley narrows further ahead, guided by two long ridges that rise steeply on either side. As you move toward them, the air picks up more warmth from the vents scattered along the slopes. Thin steam-like trails drift upward from cracks in the ground, carrying faint colors from the lanterns overhead. None of the vents erupt or pulse. They release heat at a constant rate, steady and predictable, helping to maintain this region's warmer climate. At the entrance to the narrower passage, the vegetation changes. The ground that was once covered with shimmering low plants becomes lined with taller structures. These are flexible stems with flat disc-like tops that tilt towards even the weakest glow in the sky. Their surfaces hold color for much longer than the plants in the previous basin, storing it and releasing it in slow, fading waves. When a lantern creature brightens overhead, the stems respond by leaning slightly, shifting in the direction of the strongest illumination. As you pass between the ridges, the sounds of the environment change. Echoes become softer, absorbed by thick layers of moss-like material clinging to the rock. This material glows faintly under any direct light, storing the brightness and dimming only when fully shaded. Walking past it creates a subtle trail, as the material responds to motion with brief flares of color before returning to its usual glow. A gentle breeze moves through the corridor, carrying with it drifting particles from the lantern creatures above. The air is slightly thicker here, almost cushioned, giving each breath a sense of weight without making it uncomfortable. The smell is familiar to the rest of the world, metallic, faintly sweet, and laced with the mild scent of the vegetation, absorbing color. The corridor opens again, revealing a new section of the valley. Here, the landscape is broken by tall spires of hardened organic material, rising like natural pillars. Each one has small openings along its surface, and every few minutes, a burst of colored vapor escapes from these vents. The vapor doesn't spread widely. Instead, it stays close to the pillar, drifting upward before fading. The bursts synchronize loosely with passing lanterns, releasing more vapor when brighter colors move across the sky. At the base of one pillar, small creatures cluster around the lower vents. These creatures resemble thin cylinders with tiny appendages that allow them to cling to the spire's surface. Their bodies glow when exposed to the vapor, absorbing it and turning bright for several seconds before dimming again. They shuttle between vents, collecting bursts of vapor like a food source. Further along the valley, the terrain drops slightly into a shallow depression. Pools of liquid gather here, though these aren't typical lakes. Their surfaces ripple with faint internal light, as if the pools themselves are generating a glow independent of the lanterns above. Standing near them reveals that the light isn't consistent. It pulses, slowly and irregularly, hinting at chemical reactions beneath the surface. When overhead lanterns pass by, the pools react by shifting to the same color within seconds, blending seamlessly with the sky. On the far side of the depression, the landscape rises again into a large plateau. The climb isn't steep, but the change in terrain is noticeable. The ground becomes firmer, the vegetation thinner, and the air less humid. Lantern creatures drift above the plateau at lower altitudes than in the valley, their glow more concentrated and brighter on the surface below. At the edge of the plateau, a wide field stretches out, dotted with low spherical growths. Each sphere contains thin membranes that reflect colored light strongly. When touched, the membranes tremble, releasing brief pulses of glow. A few small animals move across the field, lightly tapping the spheres as they pass, causing rapid bursts of light that scatter across the ground. The animals are small, almost insect-like, with elongated bodies that seem built for reacting quickly to environmental cues. As you cross the field, the sky above begins shifting once more. A massive group of lantern creatures moves in from the west. Their color is pale gold, soft but consistent. As they drift overhead, their combined glow covers the plateau in a uniform warm light. The spherical growths react instantly, brightening all at once. The animals pause their movements, seemingly stunned by the sudden brightness, before resuming their steady tapping once the light stabilizes. Beyond the field, the plateau slopes down into a broad plain lined with strange formations. These structures look like enormous loops of hardened plant matter, each one forming a smooth arch rising several meters into the air. The arches are positioned at regular intervals, creating long lines stretching across the plain. Some of them lean slightly, but most stand firm, their shapes unchanging despite the thick, slow-moving air. When lantern light hits the arches directly, their surfaces brighten along thin channels running within them. These channels link the arches in long, glowing lines, showing that the formations are part of a connected network. The glow flows from one arch to the next, continuing across the plain like a slow-moving current of light. As you approach one of the arches, you notice small clusters of organisms living at its base. These look similar to the conical creatures from earlier valleys, but larger and with thicker skins. They retreat into the ground whenever sudden movements occur, only emerging fully when the environment settles again. When the lanterns overhead pulse, the creatures extend thin filaments that collect falling particles and draw them into their bodies. The plain stretches far into the distance, and the interconnected arches make the entire area feel structured, though not in a way that suggests deliberate construction, just natural patterns repeated at a scale that gives the impression of organization. With every lantern pass, the plane cycles between colors, slowly shifting the entire network of glowing channels. Far to the east, a large cluster of lantern creatures begins to descend. They're noticeably bigger than most others seen so far, their membranes reflecting faint iridescent patterns. They move together in a tight formation, almost like a single organism made of many. As they draw closer, they release streams of faint particles that drift downward in soft spirals, coating the arches and the ground beneath them. When the particles land, the arches brighten momentarily, reacting with a flash of light that spreads through their channels. The effect travels in a wave, illuminating the plain in a bright sequence that slowly fades. Once the lantern cluster moves overhead, the entire plain enters another quiet cycle. The light dims slightly as the creatures drift onward, leaving behind a soft afterglow across the landscape. The arches fade, the animals return to their steady movements, and the world settles into its usual slow, steady patterns again. The plain begins to slope downward after several kilometers, the arches thinning out until only a few remain standing at wide intervals. Between them, the ground becomes smoother, almost polished in texture, covered in a thin layer of fine, color-reactive dust. Each step sends up a faint glow that fades within seconds, leaving no trace behind. The dust seems to settle into its original state almost instantly, as though the environment resets itself continuously. As the slope continues, the temperature begins to drop gradually. The air becomes cooler, and the humidity from the valley earlier is replaced by a dry stillness. Lantern creatures drift above at higher altitudes again, their glow scattered by the thicker upper haze. Only the brightest pulses reach the ground in this region, but even that faint light is enough to give the dust a soft, shifting tint as each color passes by. The slope leads into another basin, though this one is far wider and much deeper than anything seen earlier. The floor of the basin is lined with low, dense vegetation that forms a continuous layer, almost like a living carpet. The plants are tightly packed, giving the ground a springy texture when stepped on. Their color changes rapidly in response to overhead glow, but instead of flushing bright, they shift into muted tones, deep greens, dull golds, and soft pinks that never fully brighten. This suggests that the basin receives less direct lantern light, or that the plants here are adapted for low-light conditions. Moving into the basin reveals an unusual sight. Clusters of translucent structures rising from the vegetation, shaped like wide, stretched domes. Each dome is 2 to 3 meters high and made from layers of flexible material. Their surfaces ripple slightly even without wind, reacting to nearby movement. When approached, the domes brighten internally, showing faint patterns within their layers, almost like slow pulses radiating from the center. A few of the smaller gliding creatures from the valley appear here as well, but their behavior is different. Instead of darting around the domes, they move slowly across the vegetation, pausing at intervals to press their bodies against the dome surfaces. When they do, the domes glow slightly brighter before dimming again. It looks like some kind of exchange, possibly energy or nutrients moving between them. The deeper into the basin you go, the more varied these domes become. Some are tall and narrow, standing like elongated bubbles. Others are wide and low, flattened almost to the ground. A few of them crack open briefly as you pass, releasing warm, colored vapor that disperses quickly into the air. The vapor carries a faint scent similar to the metallic sweetness familiar across the world, but mixed with something floral, though still alien. Nearby, a wide channel cuts through the basin floor. It isn't filled with water, at least not in a liquid form. Instead, the channel carries a slow-moving river of luminous mist. The mist clings to the ground, sliding along the channel's path like flowing fog, its brightness shifting in accordance with the lanterns above. The behavior of the mist suggests it's denser than normal air, but lighter than any liquid. It carries faint swirling currents, giving it an appearance similar to glowing smoke. Following the mist river leads toward a cluster of large root-like structures that rise from the ground in tangled masses. They look almost like oversized plant roots exposed by erosion, each one thicker than a tree trunk and covered in small pores. These pores emit faint pulses of colored light that sync up loosely with the lantern glow overhead. The mist flows into the gaps between the roots and disappears underground, hinting that this river is feeding something deeper within the planet's organic systems. Just beyond the root cluster, the basin floor rises again into a series of rounded mounds. Each mound is covered in the same dense vegetation as the basin's floor, but with small holes leading into hollow spaces beneath. Soft sounds echo from these openings, low hums, faint clicks, and occasional short bursts of vibrating tones. None of it seems aggressive. It's more like the normal activity of unseen creatures or the environmental workings of the basin itself. As you crest the mounds, the landscape changes again. The basin narrows into a long corridor bordered by walls of tall, fiber-like growths. These structures sway gently despite the still air. Their tops glow faintly, pulsing in a slow cycle independent from the lanterns above. When a lantern's glow strengthens, the fibers brighten slightly, but their rhythm remains steady, giving this area a sense of its own internal timing. The corridor floor is softer, covered with a layer of spongy material that compresses with each step. It's warm, suggesting some kind of heat source beneath it. Occasionally, pockets of air escape from small vents in the ground, carrying a quick flash of color across the corridor. The vents are harmless and spaced irregularly, like natural openings in a breathing system. At the end of the corridor, the fibers part to reveal a wide clearing. This clearing is brighter than the rest of the basin, illuminated by a group of lantern creatures positioned unusually low in the sky. They drift slowly in a circular motion, as though caught in a stable air pattern. Their combined glow creates overlapping color fields on the ground, making the clearing ripple with shifting tones. Here, the vegetation responds more dramatically. Each plant has narrow leaves that open and close depending on which lantern's color dominates the sky at the moment. When green light washes over, the leaves widen, flattening themselves to maximize exposure. When pink or gold takes over, the leaves contract into slim shapes, releasing faint sparkles into the air. In the center of the clearing lies the largest pool seen so far. The water is completely still, more reflective than any lake previously encountered. Its surface holds the lantern glow without distortion, almost like a liquid mirror. When one of the lantern creatures drifts directly overhead, its reflection appears perfectly in the water, glowing intensely. The water seems deeper than anything encountered earlier, its bottom invisible even under the brightest light. Tiny organisms move across the pool's surface, creating thin trails of light that linger before fading. They skim in straight lines, adjust direction suddenly, and continue with no splash or disturbance. Their movement suggests a level of coordination or instinct tied to the colors passing over them. The edges of the pool are lined with tall, reed-like plants. These ones behave differently from the reeds at the earlier lake. When lantern light brightens, they release short bursts of fine mist upward. The mist hovers briefly in mid-air before drifting back into the pool, giving the impression of a constant exchange between the plants and the water. Past the clearing, the basin wall rises sharply into a cliff-like structure. At the base of the cliff, a series of tunnels extend inward. The entrances glow faintly with internal reflections, hinting at more color-reactive surfaces deeper inside. The air drifting from the tunnels is warmer and carries a thicker scent than the rest of the basin, perhaps indicating some major biological system runs through them. Above the cliff, a fresh wave of lantern creatures moves across the sky, shifting the entire basin into muted violet. Plants respond instantly, domes brighten, mist rivers glow in new tones, and the entire area cycles into another pattern without hesitation. And the landscape falls back into its steady, quiet movement, shaped entirely by the glow drifting overhead. Climbing the slope beside the cliff reveals a narrow path carved naturally into the rock-like surface. The material is firm but not stone. It has a slight give under pressure, almost like compressed organic fiber. The path weaves upward in long curves, never steep enough to strain, shaped by slow erosion from wind currents that pass through this region. As you rise higher, the air cools again. The thick scents of the lower basin fade, replaced with a cleaner, lighter atmosphere. The lantern creatures overhead shift into a wide formation, giving a blend of soft violet and muted gold across the landscape. Their glow washes the cliff face, revealing faint lines and patterns in the surface, channels that run vertically like natural conduits for moisture or light. Halfway up the slope, small clusters of growth appear along the cliff edge. These are compact structures, shaped like folded fans made of thin, translucent layers. They shift orientation slowly, turning toward whichever lantern gives the strongest illumination. When the color changes, the fans rotate again, smoothly adjusting themselves. As they turn, light refracts through their layers, creating subtle patterns on the cliff wall. Some fans emit soft tones when illuminated directly, resonating like low chimes carried only a short distance by the dense air. Near the top of the climb, the terrain flattens into a broad ledge overlooking the basin below. The entire area glows faintly as the lantern's light reflects off surfaces that store brightness. From this height, the basin appears almost like a living mosaic, each section responding to its own pattern of light, all influenced by the constant drift overhead. A narrow ridge extends outward from the ledge, leading toward a higher plateau. The ridge is lined with bulb-shaped formations that sway gently despite no obvious air movement. These bulbs change brightness depending on proximity. As you pass, each one pulses softly, responding to body heat or motion. The light they release fades quickly, but the bulbs continue swaying long after anything has passed them. Crossing the ridge leads to a new plateau, wider, flatter, and far more exposed to the open sky. Lantern creatures drift lower here, sometimes only a few dozen meters above the ground. Their details become more visible than ever. Thin lattice-like structures crisscross inside their membranes, supporting internal chambers filled with slow-moving gases. Some have veins of brighter color that pulse in long intervals, suggesting internal cycles that regulate their buoyancy or glow. The ground on this plateau is different too. It's covered in a dense network of fine tendrils, woven like natural fabric. They're soft underfoot, bending without breaking. Their colors shift subtly depending on the lantern above, but never dramatically. The tendrils seem designed for stability, anchored deep into the ground, holding each other in place across wide distances. It gives the plateau a stable, continuous feel, unlike the softer reactive vegetation in the valley. Not far from the ridge, the plateau opens to a series of sinkholes. They descend like vertical funnels, each one glowing faintly from below. When lantern light overhead intensifies, the glow from within the holes brightens in response, revealing layers of reflective surfaces lining the interior. These surfaces carry dim colors even when no direct light reaches them, indicating stored illumination or chemical reactions happening deeper underground. Approaching one sinkhole reveals soft air currents rising from it. They're warm, moving in gentle spirals that carry a faint haze. The haze glitters under lantern light, sparkling for a moment before fading again. It's likely a mixture of particles drifting up from whatever grows or functions deep in the sinkhole system. Between the sinkholes, small creatures emerge briefly. These ones stand on long, thin legs and hold their bodies upright, like small tripods. They move in careful, deliberate steps, navigating the tendrils without disturbing them. Their heads, or what appear to be heads, rotate slightly toward any bright glow. When the lantern light dims, they retreat into narrow openings in the ground, vanishing completely until the next strong glow cycle. Walking further across the plateau reveals long grooves etched into the surface. These grooves run in parallel lines for hundreds of meters, each filled with a translucent fluid. The fluid glows faintly, reflecting lantern colors with a shimmering quality. When a lantern creature pulses with brighter light, the grooves react instantly, their fluid brightening along the entire visible length. The grooves appear to be part of a much larger system, another network carrying energy, nutrients, or light through the plateau. Eventually, the plateau dips into a shallow valley filled with tall, vertical structures resembling tightly packed stalks. Each stalk stands several meters high and has a hollow core that emits a soft hum. As lantern creatures pass overhead, the hum shifts, rising and falling in slow patterns. The entire valley seems tuned to the intensity and color of the glow. When several lanterns drift close together, their overlapping light creates deep, resonant tones that vibrate through the ground. Between the stalks, patches of bioluminescent ground flora appear, glowing steadily even when lantern light weakens. This suggests they have internal reserves or perhaps process energy from the glowing fluid running through the plateau's grooves. The flora forms small islands of consistent brightness, stable even when the sky changes color. At the far edge of the valley, a large formation rises from the ground, a wide dome made of layered organic plates. Its surface shifts between matte and reflective depending on angle and light. The dome breathes slowly, expanding and contracting in smooth cycles. A faint mist escapes from gaps between the plates, carrying the same metallic sweet scent found throughout the planet, but concentrated here. When lantern creatures pass directly overhead, the dome reacts strongly. The plates glow around their edges, forming rings of illumination that spread across the surface. The glow intensifies briefly before returning to its original dim state. From a distance, the dome looks almost like a living lantern reacting to the sky. Circling around the dome leads toward another narrow corridor carved into the plateau. This corridor is quieter than the previous ones, lined with clusters of crystal-like growths that trap light within their cores. Each crystal holds a different tone of glow, as though each reflects a specific color spectrum from the lanterns. When touched, they emit a soft echoing sound, vibrating slightly. As the corridor widens near the far end, the environment settles into another long, calm cycle. Lantern creatures drift steadily above, their glow moving across the ground in slow waves. Stalks hum in the distance, crystals pulse softly, and the plateau breathes at its usual measured pace. The world pauses again, ready for whatever color shift comes next. The corridor eventually opens into a much broader landscape, a tilted expanse shaped like a shallow bowl stretching toward the horizon. The ground here is smoother than anywhere else so far, covered in tightly packed fibers that create a uniform surface. They shift color slowly as lantern creatures drift overhead, but their reactions are more subdued than the plateau tendrils behind you. These fibers are built for stability rather than display, forming a dense layer that anchors the entire region. As you walk across the bowl, the terrain gently descends toward a central depression. From this distance, faint glowing patterns ripple across the floor, slow, deliberate waves that travel through the fiber layer. At first, they seem random, but standing still reveals a repeating sequence. Each wave lines up with changes in the lantern light above, showing that even the deepest structures of this region respond directly to the sky. Near the depression, the ground warmth increases noticeably. Thin vents appear scattered across the surface, each one releasing steady streams of warm air. The air has the familiar metallic sweetness, but mixed with a new earthy scent. The vents glow faintly on the inside, storing light and emitting it back in slow pulses. Reaching the depression's center reveals a wide opening in the ground, a circular hole almost perfectly smooth around its edges. It isn't a sinkhole like before. This one appears intentional, shaped by biological processes over long periods. It descends into darkness at first, but as lantern light shifts overhead, faint internal reflections become visible, revealing layers of ribbed surfaces spiraling downward. Soft air currents rise from it, carrying a constant haze of drifting particles. Around the rim, thin stalks grow at regular intervals. They resemble antennae, swaying gently even though the air is calm. Each stalk carries a small glowing node at its tip. These nodes respond dynamically to lantern movement, brightening sharply whenever a lantern changes altitude or direction. It's unclear if they're sensing light directly or reacting to shifts in atmospheric pressure caused by the lantern creatures drifting overhead. Moving away from the depression, the landscape rises again into irregular ridges and clusters of tall, layered formations. These formations look like stacks of wide, flexible discs, each slightly offset from the one below. They sway subtly, their layers bending in slow motion. When lantern light intensifies, the discs flatten slightly, absorbing more illumination. When the light fades, they curl inward, returning to a resting position. Between these stacks, narrow channels cut through the ground like shallow trenches. They're filled with a slow-moving flow of glowing liquid. The liquid is thicker than water and moves sluggishly, almost like viscous gel. It reflects lantern colors intensely, creating bright strips that snake across the landscape. Every few meters, small inlets lead from the channels into the stacks, suggesting the liquid feeds them in some way. Further ahead, a cluster of lantern creatures drifts unusually low, dipping close to the ridges. Their presence changes the entire area instantly. The stacks shift their positioning, aligning toward the brightest creature. Some open wider, exposing internal structures that glow in reaction to the lantern's proximity. Others emit faint streams of vapor that drift upward toward the glowing bodies above. The lantern creatures react as well, adjusting their altitude and drifting slightly sideways to avoid direct contact, but remaining low enough to interact. As the group passes, the glow across the ridges changes from violet to pale gold, and the stacks begin to curl inward again. The glowing channels dim slightly, running cooler as the lanterns move away. Beyond the ridges, the terrain levels into a wide field dotted with tall, thin pillars. These pillars are hollow and made of smooth, flexible material. Their surfaces shift tone depending on the angle of lantern light. When a lantern moves overhead, the pillars respond by bending slightly in the direction of the light. They never bend far enough to topple, moving instead in slow arcs that resemble the motion of plants swaying underwater. Closer inspection shows tiny openings along the pillars' sides. From these openings, faint puffs of colored mist escape at regular intervals. The mist disperses quickly, forming thin trails that seem to hang in the dense atmosphere before fading. These trails carry faint glimmers, reacting to lantern light like suspended glitter. At the far end of the field, a more complex formation rises. It's a network of intertwined arches that extend several meters high, connected by thin strands. The strands pulse slowly, carrying a glow that travels through them like electrical currents. The arches themselves are semi-transparent, their surfaces catching lantern light and concentrating it into thin beams that extend outward. These beams shift when lanterns drift overhead, pointing toward the brightest source. Under the arches, clusters of round organisms sit anchored into the ground. Their skins are smooth and slightly reflective. When the glow from the arches travels across them, they brighten momentarily and expand as though taking in energy. When the glow fades, they shrink back to normal size and release thin wisps of vapor. The vapor reacts with the air, producing brief flashes of light that drift upward before fading. Past the arches, a gentle slope leads downward again, into a region with broader, flatter shapes. These appear to be massive, overlapping leaves or plates, forming natural terraces. Each plate holds pockets of liquid that glow faintly, shifting colors depending on the sky above. When lanterns gather overhead, the pockets brighten, forming temporary pools of color. When they drift away, the glow dims slowly, lingering like a fading memory of the last light. Between the plates, long tendrils rise from narrow cracks. They sway independently from any breeze, responding instead to faint vibrations carried through the ground. When a lantern creature sends a strong pulse of light, the tendrils stretch upward, reaching several meters high before relaxing again. A faint sound begins to rise from the far end of the terrace field. It's a series of low-frequency vibrations, traveling through the ground more than through the air. The source becomes clear as you approach. A cluster of massive lantern creatures is descending in a wide spiral. These ones are larger than any seen before, several stories tall, their membranes thicker and carrying complex patterns of light within. They drift toward a large depression ahead, forming a slow-moving ring above it. Reaching the edge of the depression reveals a massive luminous basin. Its surface is covered with a thick layer of glowing mist, shifting between green and gold as the lantern creatures circle above. The mist swirls gently, as though pulled by some internal current. Beneath it, the basin floor contains a reflective material that amplifies the lantern glow, sending waves of color back into the sky. The giant lantern creatures seem drawn to this area. They lower themselves just enough for their tendrils to brush the mist, causing bright flashes that ripple through the basin. The surrounding ground reacts instantly. Tendrils rise, plates brighten, and the entire landscape cycles through a quick burst of color before settling again. As the lanterns drift upward, the flashes fade, leaving the basin in a calm, steady glow. The mist returns to its slow rotations and the world resumes its gradual cycles. The plateau beyond the basin stretches on, faintly lit, waiting for the next wave of lantern creatures to reshape its colors once more. Beyond the luminous basin, the terrain rises into a broad upland zone with scattered clusters of tall, narrow formations. These structures look like elongated cones tapering into thin points, their surfaces smooth and slightly reflective. In the dimmer stretches between lantern pulses, they fade into the background, almost blending with the terrain. But when lantern creatures pass overhead, each cone brightens along internal channels, lighting up in precise patterns that vary from structure to structure. Walking among them reveals faint vibrations beneath the ground, steady, low pulses repeating at consistent intervals. Each cone seems to respond to the cycles differently. Some glow brighter during the peak of a lantern's pulse, while others illuminate just after the glow fades. It creates a staggered pattern across the uplands, almost like the cones are passing signals from one to the next. Between the cones, the ground becomes carpeted with thin, overlapping scales. They're slightly flexible and react to weight by dipping gently without cracking or tearing. Much like the fibers seen earlier, these scales shift color slowly with the sky above, though they avoid sudden changes. Even when a bright lantern passes overhead, the scales brighten only gradually, prioritizing stability over rapid reaction. Further ahead, the landscape breaks into deep grooves carved into the upland floor. These grooves run parallel for long distances and are filled with a faintly glowing substance. Unlike the gel-like fluids from earlier regions, this material is thinner, flowing with more speed. The grooves are interconnected, forming a large network of channels that spread out toward the horizon. As you follow one of the main channels, the terrain flattens into a wide plateau marked with circular depressions. Each depression hosts a pool of the glowing fluid, circulating slowly in tight spirals. The pools emit a steady hum, quiet but persistent. When lantern light strengthens, the hum deepens. When the light dims, the sound softens. This gives the entire plateau a low, droning presence, never loud, but always there, weaving through the air like a continuous backdrop to the drifting glow above. At the edge of one pool, strange structures rise from the ground. They resemble tall reeds made from translucent material, each filled with a liquid brighter than the pool beneath. When lanterns shift direction or altitude, the liquid inside the reeds rises and falls, responding to air pressure changes caused by the drifting bodies above. A stronger lantern pulse causes the liquid to surge upward, producing a quick flash of color at the reed tips before settling back into place. Crossing the plateau, the landscape transitions into a dense arrangement of ridgelines. These ridges loop and twist, creating natural corridors that weave between them. Their surfaces are covered in a thin layer of moss-like growth that glows faintly, even without lantern light. The glow intensifies when motion passes nearby. Every step triggers a ripple of brightness that extends a few meters before dimming again. Some ridges are hollow, and low tones echo from within them. The sound isn't rhythmic, just scattered bursts of soft resonance created by shifting temperatures or the movement of air currents forced through narrow cavities. When two lantern creatures cross paths in the sky above, creating interference patterns in their glow, the hollows respond by producing brief sequences of tones that drift outward through the ridges like distant chimes. Deep within these corridors, pools of still air collect, heavier and warmer than the rest of the plateau. The warmth suggests underground activity, perhaps networks of biological systems regulating the flow of glowing fluids across the region. Tiny organisms gather in these warm pockets, drifting in small swarms. They resemble floating grains of light, hovering just above the ground. When disturbed, they rise slightly, dispersing before settling back down. Their glow reacts to lantern light, but on a delayed cycle, flickering with a soft lag that makes them appear disconnected from the sky's patterns. Emerging from the ridges leads to a broken expanse filled with wide, layered terraces. Each terrace holds shallow basins filled with a mixture of mist and liquid. The basins have soft edges shaped by slow organic growth rather than erosion. They store the glow from lantern creatures more intensely than any feature seen so far. When a lantern's pulse reaches them, the basins brighten sharply, turning into radiant pools that cast colored light across the terraces. On closer inspection, the basins aren't uniform. Some contain thick liquid, others are covered in dense fog, and a few hold extremely thin, glassy surfaces that ripple with the slightest vibration. The glassy ones reflect lantern light in clean, sharp patterns, creating distinct beams that cut across the terraces. When the misty basins brighten, they fill the air with drifting particles that catch the beams and scatter the glow in soft gradients. The terraces step down into a deep trough lined with larger organisms, broad, flattened shapes anchored into the ground. These organisms appear dormant at first, but when lantern light intensifies, they swell slightly and emit faint streams of color from vents along their edges. Smaller creatures gather around these vents, feeding on whatever is released. The relationship appears symbiotic. The small creatures clean the vents while the larger organisms provide a steady source of energy-rich particles. Beyond the trough, a series of narrow canyons opens up, each lined with tall fins of semi-transparent material. These fins rise several meters into the air, arranged in parallel rows that stretch for kilometers. Their surfaces are layered like the inside of seashells, capturing and holding colored light. When lantern creatures drift overhead, the fins glow from within, creating long corridors of shifting illumination. The glow travels down the fins in smooth gradients, giving the canyon floors a soft, flowing brightness. Inside the canyons, the soundscape changes again. The tall fins capture vibrations and release them as soft, elongated tones. Each lantern pulse reverberates through the canyon walls, producing deep, mellow sounds that echo for long distances. Even the smallest shift in the sky translates into subtle audio changes, turning the canyons into a constantly responding environment. At the end of one of these canyons, the terrain widens into an open plain, dominated by a strange collection of dome-like structures. These domes are more solid than the translucent ones seen earlier. Their surfaces carry rigid patterns, grooves, ridges, and dim channels that glow only when touched by direct lantern light. As the lanterns move overhead, the channels spark with color, running in branching paths across the domes before fading. Clusters of insect-like creatures gather here, perched atop the domes. They move in deliberate motions, lifting their limbs with precision. Their bodies glow faintly, but their illumination strengthens dramatically whenever the lanterns pulse. They appear to be absorbing the flashes of energy through panels on their backs and discharging excess illumination through fine filaments that extend from their hind sections. These discharges drift like faint sparks, fading before they hit the ground. Moving past the domes, the plain stretches into the distance, illuminated by distant lantern creatures drifting low along the horizon. Their glow paints broad strokes of green and pink across the landscape. Every feature ahead reacts in its own way, some brightening sharply, others softening their glow, and many falling into deeper patterns that aren't immediately obvious. The air settles again, dense and warm, as the next wave of lantern creatures approaches from the far side of the horizon. The world waits for the next shift, ready to cycle into another sweeping change of color.
Past the glowing plain, the terrain begins to angle upward again into a broad incline covered in dense, layered growth. The layers stack like overlapping sheets, each one only a few millimeters thick, but tough enough to support weight. They flex slightly underfoot, absorbing impact and distributing pressure evenly. Lantern light causes each sheet to brighten or dim, depending on its angle to the sky, producing a faint gradient across the incline, even when colors shift overhead. As the incline rises, the air becomes cooler and noticeably clearer. The drifting particles common in the lower valleys thin out, allowing the glow from lantern creatures to reach the ground with less interference. Their light appears sharper here, outlining every detail across the landscape without scattering into haze. Near the crest of the incline, tall, ribbon-like shapes emerge from the ground. These structures twist slowly, anchored at the base and rising 10 to 20 meters into the air. They're flexible and move in long, sweeping motions, responding to even the smallest change in atmospheric pressure. When lantern light strengthens, the ribbons stiffen slightly and carry bright streaks along their lengths, almost like slow electrical signals traveling upward. Between the ribbons, the ground dips into shallow bowls filled with a clear, viscous fluid. The fluid holds lantern light extremely well, glowing steadily even when the sky dims. When a creature passes overhead, the bowls brighten sharply, almost like a sudden flare, before gradually settling into their previous level of illumination. Small, orb-shaped organisms glide across the surface of these bowls, leaving thin glowing trails behind them that fade into the thicker fluid. The incline eventually levels into a wide plateau broken by natural arches made from layered organic material. These arches vary in size, some only a meter or two high, while others stretch dozens of meters across. The material is smooth, stronger than the fibers seen earlier, and slightly translucent. Lantern light passes through the arches and creates long beams that fan out across the ground. When multiple lanterns overlap their beams, the plateau fills with intersecting lines of color. Beneath the arches, small creatures gather in clusters. They're triangular in shape with 3 flexible limbs used for both walking and clinging. Their bodies glow faintly from within, but the intensity fluctuates with the lantern pulses overhead. When a bright cluster of lantern creatures passes by, the triangular organisms gather tightly together, brightening in unison. When the light fades, they disperse into smaller groups, each glowing independently. The plateau narrows further ahead into a channel carved by long-term biological activity rather than erosion. The walls of the channel are coated in a thick, resin-like substance that traps and stores light. When lanterns brighten, the resin glows intensely, revealing veins and branching structures inside. The light travels along these veins in slow waves, spreading downward like a controlled cascade. Inside the channel, the ground is covered with soft, sponge-like material. It compresses slightly under each step, releasing faint puffs of colored mist that drift upward before dissolving into the air. The mist carries small flecks of light that catch the lantern glow and scatter it in shifting patterns along the channel walls. Occasionally, the sponge surface ripples slightly, likely a response to nearby vibrations or shifting pressure within the ground. The channel ends abruptly at a cliff overlooking another vast valley. But this one is different from the others. The entire valley floor is covered in a thick layer of luminous fog, glowing faintly with the combined color of all lantern creatures currently overhead. The fog isn't uniform. It swirls in wide, slow currents, forming spirals that stretch across the entire valley. Occasionally, pockets of brighter fog rise upward like soft pillars before thinning out and settling back down. Descending the cliff is easier than expected thanks to a series of natural terraces built from rigid organic plates. These plates form steps that wrap around the cliff face in a long spiraling path. Each plate contains grooves that glow brightly whenever the foot disturbs their surface. The glow lingers for several seconds before fading entirely, leaving no trace behind. Reaching the valley floor reveals that the fog layer is denser than it appeared from above. It reaches waist height and flows like a liquid, moving around obstacles and reacting to lantern light with immediate changes in color and brightness. The fog feels slightly warmer than the surrounding air and carries a faint scent similar to the vapor found near earlier pools. Within it, small organisms drift like tiny sparks, rising and falling with the currents. Large mounds dot the valley floor, each emitting a soft hum. The hum shifts with the intensity of lantern light overhead, rising in pitch when brighter colors pass and lowering again during dimmer stretches. Atop each mound sits a cluster of flexible tendrils that sway without wind, reaching through the fog as if searching for drifting particles. When they catch something, a faint glow pulses along their lengths, suggesting absorption or filtering. Further into the valley, massive structures rise from the fog, towering columns made of braided fibers. These columns extend dozens of meters into the air and support large, flat platforms at their tops. The platforms collect fog and light alike, storing both and releasing them slowly. When lantern creatures pass directly overhead, the platforms glow intensely, casting broad discs of color onto the fog below. Beneath the platforms, shadowy shapes move through the fog. They're large but slow, following predictable paths between the mounds. Only small glimpses are visible, rounded forms stirring the fog as they move. They seem adapted to life within the fog layer, relying on its density and steady color flux. None approach directly, maintaining distance even when lantern light brightens the valley. On the far side of the valley, the fog thins as the ground rises again into a slope lined with rigid growths. These growths resemble tall spires with sharp edges, aligned like rows of teeth. Their surfaces are layered with thin plates that shift slightly during lantern pulses, creating clicking sounds across the slope. When the lantern glow dims, the clicks stop instantly, leaving the slope in complete silence. Climbing this slope reveals thin streams of luminous mist leaking from cracks between the spires. These streams drift upward in continuous threads, feeding into the fog layer behind you. The cracks glow with stored color, suggesting a deeper system beneath the surface regulating the movement of fog throughout the entire valley. At the crest of the slope, the landscape opens into a long, narrow plateau with a completely different tone. Here, the ground is covered in smooth, reflective sheets that stretch for hundreds of meters. These sheets hold lantern light with incredible clarity, producing mirror-like surfaces that reflect the sky nearly perfectly. When lantern creatures drift across, their reflections glide along the plateau, moving in near silence. Some sheets are slightly raised, forming shallow ridges. Others overlap, creating fractured mirrors that scatter lantern light into geometric patterns across the ground. The clarity of these reflections makes the plateau feel brighter than any region so far, despite the same lanterns drifting overhead. Small, disc-shaped organisms move across these reflective surfaces. They glide smoothly, their undersides emitting faint pulses that seem to propel them forward without friction. When lantern light passes over them, their bodies brighten and release thin lines of colored light behind them that fade after several meters. At the far end of the reflective plateau, a new region begins to take shape, a series of wide, shallow basins filled with shimmering dust. The dust behaves like a fluid, shifting in waves even without wind. Lantern light causes the dust to glow in layers, creating visible currents that roll across the basins like gentle tides. The movement of the dust reveals deep patterns etched into the basin floors, some geometric, others more irregular. Each lantern pulse triggers different sections of these patterns to brighten, suggesting they react to specific wavelengths or intensities. And as another wave of lantern creatures begins its slow drift across the sky, the basins respond immediately, preparing for a new cycle of color and motion.
Beyond the shimmering dust basins, the terrain shifts again into a region shaped by long, overlapping ridges. These ridges form natural corridors that wind gently through the landscape, with each ridge standing a few meters taller than the next. Their surfaces are firm, not brittle, and covered in a thin coating of material that reacts to lantern light by producing a dull, matte glow rather than a bright, reflective one. This keeps the corridors softly illuminated even when the lantern creatures overhead drift farther away. Walking between the ridges, the ground underfoot becomes textured with thousands of tiny circular pads. Each pad compresses slightly when stepped on, releasing a faint pulse of color that spreads out and fades within seconds. The pulses never grow too bright, just enough to show the movement of anything passing through these corridors. Smaller local creatures take advantage of this. They move cautiously from one pad to the next, their rotes becoming visible through the short-lived trails they leave behind. As the ridges widen, small pools of translucent gel come into view. These pools sit in shallow depressions and contain liquid with a consistency thicker than water but more fluid than the gel channels from earlier regions. When lantern creatures brighten overhead, the pools glow sharply, becoming almost transparent. When the glow fades, the liquid returns to its muted, opaque state. Creatures similar to the triangular organisms from the plateaus gather around these pools, dipping their limbs into the gel and absorbing it in slow, sharp, deliberate movements. Moving deeper into this region, the ridges slowly diminish until the land levels out into a huge, open stretch. The ground becomes smoother and more uniform, made up of a continuous layer of flexible, mat-like growth. It has the same faint give as earlier sponge-like surfaces, but is firmer, maintaining stability whether stepped on or not. Lantern light causes the mats to darken rather than brighten, absorbing the glow before releasing it back as a faint, delayed haze. Small vents appear scattered across this open area, each one releasing extremely thin streams of heated air. Unlike earlier vents, these produce no mist or particles. The air leaving them is clear but warm. When lanterns pulse brightly, the vents respond by increasing the speed of airflow slightly, releasing soft waves of heat that ripple across the surface. Ahead, long, narrow fissures break the ground into segments. Each fissure emits faint stored glow that travels along its length in slow pulses. The glow moves like a current, influenced directly by the lanterns drifting overhead. Some fissures brighten sharply when exposed to certain colors, while others react only to dimmer or deeper hues. The pattern of reactions creates a network of shifting lines across the landscape, turning the surface into a map of glowing veins that expand and contract over time. Crossing these fissures leads into an area of tall, flattened mounds. The mounds rise smoothly from the ground, their sides sloping at gentle angles. Their surfaces are covered in thin, scale-like growths that peel back slightly when exposed to brighter lantern pulses. Under strong light, the scales lift like tiny shutters, exposing a brighter interior glow. As the lantern light fades, the scales close again, sealing in the brightness and turning the mound surfaces back to a muted tone. Between the mounds, deeper troughs run through the landscape, filled with drifting vapor. The vapor sits low, only knee-height, and moves slowly through the troughs in wide, looping currents. When lantern creatures pass overhead, the vapor picks up their colors instantly and carries them through the trough system. This creates long ribbons of shifting color winding between the mounds, always in motion, never fully settling. Beyond the mound field, the ground rises again into a plateau with clusters of tall prismatic structures. These prisms are highly reflective, much more so than anything seen earlier. Lantern light bounces off their surfaces in clean beams, splitting into multiple colors depending on the prism angles. In strong lantern pulses, the entire cluster creates a web of refracted light that spreads across the landscape in sharp streaks. Smaller organisms gather at the base of these prisms, their bodies glowing faintly as they absorb stray beams. The plateau narrows into another corridor, this one carved into the ground like a deep, linear trench. Its walls are smooth and lined with layers of translucent material that glow faintly even in dim intervals. The trench floor contains a thick, glowing fog similar to the valley fog from earlier, but here the fog rises only to ankle height. It swirls around steps and shifts with even slight movements, reacting directly to pressure changes. Halfway through the trench, the walls begin to vibrate in response to lantern pulses overhead. The vibrations create soft, musical tones that travel the length of the corridor. Each lantern pulse triggers a different pitch, causing the trench to play long, resonant sequences that echo faintly. The tones never grow loud, just steady enough to give the area a sense of slow, continuous activity. The trench eventually opens into a wide chamber-like area with a high circular wall made entirely of translucent plates. These plates overlap like scales and contain internal channels filled with dull glow. When lantern creatures drift into view, the channels brighten and the plates shift slightly, opening small gaps that release quick flashes of colored light. This light spreads across the chamber before fading. In the center of the chamber, a large formation rises from the ground, a dome with branching tendrils extending in every direction. These tendrils pulse faintly, carrying colored glow outward into the ground. The dome itself shifts between muted colors depending on the lanterns overhead, always reacting a little slower than the surrounding structures, almost storing the light before releasing it. The chamber floor is covered in shallow pools of reflective mist. The mist forms a thin layer that ripples with each lantern pulse, spreading bands of color across the ground. Small, gliding organisms navigate this mist as though skimming across a polished surface, their trails glowing briefly before disappearing. At the far end of the chamber, multiple pathways branch out, each lined with clusters of tall, narrow spines. These spines shift color more dramatically than most features seen so far. When lantern light brightens, the spines swell and become fully illuminated. When the light fades, they contract sharply, returning to slender, dim shapes. Their rapid responses make the pathways flicker with shifting brightness, creating corridors that appear to breathe with the lantern cycles. Taking the central path leads out onto another plateau, this one covered with broad, segmented slabs resembling large scales. The slabs lock together in repeating patterns that shift subtly underfoot but never destabilize. Lantern light creates moving waves across the slabs, highlighting the segments in timed sequences. In the distance, another group of lantern creatures approaches, larger ones drifting closer to the surface than earlier. Their glow casts long, wide beams across the plateau, preparing the landscape for another deep color shift. And as they drift overhead, the entire region brightens at once, waiting to cycle through another long phase of transitions. As the larger lantern creatures drift closer, their glow becomes strong enough to cover the entire plateau in long, sweeping bands of light. The segmented slabs underfoot react immediately. Each segment brightens along its edges, creating a grid-like pattern that spreads outward in waves. The slabs shift their colors gradually, taking on deeper tones the longer the lanterns hover overhead. Moving across the plateau reveals gentle undulations in the terrain, broad rises and shallow dips that give the ground a slow, rolling feel. In the dips, clusters of circular structures emerge. These structures are low to the ground and smooth, shaped almost like flattened domes. When lantern light hits them directly, faint symbols appear across their surfaces, glowing lines arranged in repeating formations. The lines fade quickly when the light shifts, leaving the domes featureless again. Between these domes, the ground becomes punctured by narrow vents that release thin streams of warm air. Unlike earlier vents, these streams carry no smell and release no glowing particles. They simply create small distortions in the air, visible only when strong lantern light passes over them, bending slightly as it hits the rising warmth. Continuing onward, the plateau narrows into a long slope dotted with tall spike-like formations. These spikes are smooth and slightly flexible, bending slowly in response to shifts in air pressure. Their tips glow faintly regardless of the lantern color overhead. When the lantern creatures pulse brighter, the spikes react by straightening, aligning themselves toward the brightest source. When the glow dims, the spikes relax and tilt back to random orientations. Past the spike field, the ground becomes firmer and more uniform, transitioning into a wide expanse covered in tightly interlocked crystalline plates. The plates are large, hexagonal in shape and translucent. Lantern light refracts through them, producing clear, geometric shadows on the ground below. As the lanterns move, the shadows shift in precise patterns. Some plates brighten internally, suggesting they store the lantern glow before releasing it slowly as the pulses fade. Scattered across the crystalline plane are tall funnel-shaped structures. Each funnel is anchored to the ground by thick tendrils that extend deep beneath the plates. The top of each funnel flares outward like a wide opening. When lantern creatures drift directly overhead, the funnels capture the light and concentrate it, creating narrow beams that shoot downward into their centers. These beams illuminate internal chambers filled with swirling vapor, producing short, intense flashes before settling back into soft illumination. A gentle breeze moves across the plane, carrying faint traces of light-reactive particles. These particles drift freely, clinging to the edges of the crystalline plates before falling away. When a strong lantern pulse sweeps over the region, the particles brighten sharply, creating floating points of color that hover momentarily before dissolving into the air. Further ahead, the crystalline plane transitions into a region dominated by tall, curved pillars. These pillars extend upward in broad arcs, some linking together at their tops to form partial rings. The surface of each pillar is smooth and semi-transparent, with faint internal structures resembling branching crystal formations. Lantern light triggers these internal structures to glow, creating slow-moving patterns that travel upward through the pillar's cores. At the base of the pillars, hollow depressions contain pools of thick, luminous liquid. The liquid's glow deepens with each lantern pulse, releasing soft waves that travel across the surface. When disturbed, the pools send out thin ripples of brighter color before calming again. Small, disc-shaped organisms skim the tops of these pools, feeding on the luminous liquid by dipping their undersides briefly into the surface. Moving between the pillars leads to another shift in the terrain. The surface rises into a broad ridge, lined with elongated pods that grow horizontally out of the ground. Each pod contains layers of thin, flexible membranes stacked on top of one another. These membranes inflate slowly during strong lantern pulses, releasing faint vibrations that travel along the ridge. When the light dims, the pods contract and the vibrations fade completely. On the far side of the ridge, the landscape opens into yet another wide valley, this one filled with tall blade-like structures arranged in dense clusters. The blades sway slowly, their surfaces coated in thin, light-reactive coatings. When lantern light changes color, the blades shift tones immediately, forming large patches of uniform color across the valley. When multiple lantern creatures overlap overhead, the valley turns into a mosaic of blended colors, each blade reacting to the strongest glow nearby. The ground beneath the blades is covered in tiny, bead-like organisms. Each bead glows faintly and shifts its color based on the lantern pulses. When stepped on, the beads disperse slightly before regathering, maintaining their clusters. The creatures seem harmless, simply reacting to pressure and light in predictable cycles. Following a natural path through the blade clusters leads to a central clearing where the ground becomes smoother and more reflective. This surface reacts strongly to lantern creatures, brightening across its entire area when the glow intensifies. Thin streams of vapor rise from cracks, carrying streaks of color that disperse in the air. The clearing acts almost like a light reservoir, holding lantern glow longer than the surrounding valley. Beyond the clearing, the terrain leads back into a series of narrow winding channels carved through dense vegetation. This vegetation is thicker than earlier growths, forming walls of tough fibers. The fibers glow along their edges when lantern light strikes them, producing a soft halo effect that outlines each strand. When the lantern creatures pulse, the halo brightens before returning to a faint glow. Inside these channels, the air is warmer and thicker. Floating motes drift along the passageways, rising and falling with the shifting glow. Small creatures move through the walls of fiber, their bodies barely visible through the gaps. They emit faint pulses of light as they travel, syncing loosely with the lantern rhythms overhead. Emerging from the channels leads to a higher plateau filled with wide, disc-shaped growths stacked in layers like enormous plates. These discs carry strong internal glow that reacts sharply to lantern movements. When the lantern creatures brighten, the discs illuminate in sequence, creating a ripple of color that spreads across the plateau in concentric waves. When the glow fades, the discs darken again, holding only faint residual brightness. At the far side of the plateau, the land rises once more into a tall promontory overlooking another distant basin. Lantern creatures gather on the horizon, ready to drift into this region. Their approaching glow spreads across the landscape, preparing the world for another large-scale shift in color and activity. The environment settles again into its steady rhythm, quietly synchronizing itself with the sky above. From the tall promontory, the view stretches far across the next basin. This basin is larger than the previous ones, flattened across its center and bordered by long, curved walls that rise from the ground like natural fortifications. As the incoming lantern creatures approach from the horizon, their combined glow runs across the basin floor in long, sweeping arcs, revealing shifting patterns carved into the terrain. Descending from the promontory, the path leads to a broad ramp of smooth, tightly woven fibers. These fibers form a continuous sheet that flexes very slightly with weight, distributing pressure evenly across its surface. As the lantern glow strengthens, faint lines appear along the fibers, forming pathways of pale light that follow the direction of travel. The lines fade in seconds, resetting once the movement stops. Reaching the basin entrance reveals clusters of large, bowl-shaped structures positioned in loose rings. Each bowl is wide and shallow, constructed from overlapping plates that curve outward at the edges. When lantern light passes directly overhead, the plates absorb some of the glow and release it slowly over time, creating a soft illumination even during dim intervals. The bowls are filled with thin layers of luminous mist that swirl gently, reacting to the slightest breeze or motion. Small organisms gather around the bowls. These ones are elongated with multiple thin legs and a flexible spine. They move in smooth, coordinated motions, passing between bowls and occasionally dipping their bodies into the mist. When they do, their internal glow strengthens, suggesting the mist has some role in sustaining them. Moving deeper into the basin, the ground shifts into a broad grid of shallow depressions. Each depression contains a different type of vegetation or material, some filled with short, bristle-like growths, others smooth and reflective, and a few containing low pools of gel-like substance. The grid reacts to lantern creatures in organized cycles. When the glow brightens, specific sections activate, lighting up in predictable patterns. When the glow fades, the entire grid falls into muted colors again. Past the grid, the basin floor rises slightly into an area dominated by thick, pillar-like growths. These pillars stand in close groups, each one several meters tall with wide, flat tops. The tops are lined with thin channels that fill with glowing fluid whenever lantern light strengthens. The fluid circulates in loops before draining back inside the pillars, producing faint sounds resembling slow-moving liquid. In one section, the pillars lean inward over a circular depression. Their tops tilt, directing the channels of fluid toward the center. In the middle of the depression sits a single, larger structure that absorbs the collected glow, brightening significantly during strong lantern pulses. Once the pulse ends, the structure slowly releases its stored light as a steady, dull glow. Continuing across the basin reveals a different region. Vast sheets of thin, semi-solid material stretched tightly across the ground. These sheets shift color gradually, influenced by lantern movement. When stepped on, they depress slightly before bouncing back to shape. Beneath them, faint lights flicker through the gaps, suggesting a network of bioluminescent channels running under the surface. Occasionally, small openings appear within the sheets. These openings exhale warm, glowing vapor that wafts upward in spirals. When lantern creatures pass overhead, the vapor intensifies and takes on the color of the sky, producing columns of shifting light across the basin. Near the center of the basin, the landscape transforms again into an expanse of tall, root-like formations rising from the ground. These formations twist upward before splitting into multiple branches, forming natural lattices. The branches hold thin membranes that ripple slowly, reacting to changes in air pressure and lantern pulses. When multiple lantern creatures overlap, the membranes brighten in layers, creating large towers of light that grow and shrink with each shift in the sky. Moving between these towering roots reveals clusters of spherical organisms nestled in protected hollows. They vibrate faintly, syncing with lantern rhythms. When the glow brightens, the spheres expand slightly and emit soft flashes. When the glow fades, they shrink back to their dormant states. Beyond the root formations, a wide band of reflective sand-like material stretches across the basin. The sand is extremely fine, almost powdery, and it moves like liquid underfoot. As lantern creatures pass overhead, the sand glows sharply before settling into softer tones. Waves of color travel across the surface, driven by shifts in wind and the movement of nearby creatures. When the lantern glow pulses, the sand responds in ripples that appear to move toward the source of light. Crossing the glowing sand leads to another cluster of structures, tall columns with hollow centers and open tops. These columns act as chimneys, releasing slow streams of vapor from deep underground. The vapor reflects lantern light as it emerges, creating vertical beams that extend several meters into the air before dissipating. Some columns release thicker clouds during strong light cycles, filling the air with swirling patches of color. Smaller creatures climb the sides of these columns. They have segmented bodies and long appendages used for gripping the porous surface. When they reach the top, they pause briefly in the vapor, their bodies brightening noticeably, before descending again into the sand-covered ground. Toward the far side of the basin, the terrain begins to slope upward into a series of raised terraces. Each terrace is lined with wide, fan-like growths anchored into the ground. The fans expand and contract in slow cycles, reacting to both lantern light and wind currents. When the lantern creatures brightens directly above, the fans stretch wide and emit soft waves of color along their edges. When the glow dims, the fans close slightly and hold only residual faint illumination. Atop the terraces, small shallow pools collect glowing liquid. These pools behave differently from earlier basins. Their surfaces ripple even without external disturbance. The light inside them appears to move independently, shifting in swirling patterns that follow no obvious rhythm. These patterns intensify when lantern creatures drift lower, suggesting some deeper connection between the sky and the liquid. Ascending the terraces leads to the edge of another elevated plateau, this one dotted with thin spires that resemble tightly coiled springs. Their surfaces are rigid but made of thin layered material that resonates when exposed to strong lantern pulses. This resonance produces faint, ringing vibrations that travel across the plateau in expanding circles. The spires react independently. Some resonate strongly, others barely move, depending entirely on the frequency of the glow overhead. At the far end of the plateau, the terrain slopes downward into yet another region. Lantern creatures gather on the horizon again, preparing to drift into this new area. Their glow begins to spread across the landscape, shifting the tones of every structure and organism in its path. The world beneath responds patiently, waiting for the next wave of color to shape its movements. 12. The slope from the plateau leads into a wide trough shaped by long, steady biological growth rather than erosion. The ground here is firm and slightly textured, covered in thin, interlocking plates that shift color in slow gradients. These plates never brighten sharply. They maintain a constant, muted glow that only deepens or lightens depending on the lantern activity above. As the trough widens, clusters of tall, rigid stems appear. Each stem rises straight upward and ends in a narrow point. Their surfaces are smooth but covered in extremely fine pores that shimmer faintly under any lantern glow. When a lantern creature pulses, the pores open briefly, releasing tiny particles that drift upward before vanishing into the dense atmosphere. The openings occur simultaneously across entire clusters, creating brief puffs of soft color that fade quickly. Between the stems, the ground dips into small hollows filled with thick, luminous gel. The gel doesn't behave like a liquid. It barely moves when disturbed, spreading slowly before settling again. Lantern pulses create shifting colors through the gel, forming swirling patterns that move outward from the center of each hollow. Small circular organisms gather along the gel edges, absorbing its glow through thin feeding filaments. Farther into the trough, the terrain becomes more complex. Large plates rise from the ground, layered like oversized leaves pressed into dense stacks. These plates open and close slowly, revealing brighter surfaces beneath. When they close, the brighter layers are sealed away, leaving only a dim outer glow. The plates open wider whenever lantern creatures drift closer, as though responding directly to the intensity of the sky. Moving between these layered growths leads to an open expanse filled with tall loops made of flexible organic material. The loops rise from the ground, curve upward, and bend back toward the surface without touching. Their inner surfaces reflect lantern light far more intensely than the outer surfaces, creating narrow tunnels of color that run through each loop. When several lantern creatures align overhead, the loops brighten in wide bands, sending moving light across the ground in straight lines. Small animals navigate the loops with ease. They're shaped like elongated ovals, moving on dozens of tiny legs that make almost no sound. They weave through the loops in deliberate patterns, sometimes pausing at points of highest illumination before continuing their movements. Their bodies glow subtly, but the light they carry is weaker than the environment around them. Past the loops, the ground rises again into a gentle slope covered in thin, ribbon-like layers. These layers peel upward at the edges, forming natural flaps that flutter slightly when exposed to lantern pulses. They don't move randomly. The flaps open in specific sequences, creating waves of motion across the slope. This behavior appears tied to the colors above. Green light triggers faster motions, while pink and gold produce slower, more deliberate responses. At the top of the slope, a long field stretches forward. This field is dominated by wide, shallow pits filled with a fine, dust-like substance. The dust reacts extremely quickly to lantern light. As soon as a pulse reaches the pits, the dust brightens sharply, creating short-lived flashes that move across the field like sudden bursts of illumination. When the glow fades, the dust returns to its inert, muted state almost immediately. Between the pits, the ground is covered in patterned ridges. Each ridge contains thin internal channels that glow steadily. The channels pulse in slow intervals independent of the lanterns overhead, though their brightness increases noticeably when lantern groups gather in dense formations. These pulses travel across the ridges like slow-moving currents, sometimes converging at intersections where the glow briefly intensifies. Continuing forward, the landscape transitions again into an area filled with tall, hollow structures resembling organic chimneys. These chimneys are slender at the base and widen gradually toward the top. They release thick vapor in regular intervals, and when a lantern creature passes overhead, the vapor changes color instantly, rising into the air in shifting waves. The chimneys appear to operate in a cycle: vapor release, brief pause, then another release timed loosely to the sky's brightness. Small creatures cling to the sides of these chimneys. Their bodies are flat and wide, shaped like discs. They position themselves directly within the vapor streams and brighten rapidly when exposed. After absorbing enough glow, they glide down to the ground and move to other chimneys, repeating the cycle. Past the chimneys, the terrain opens into a huge shelf of smooth, glass-like material. The surface is nearly reflective, though the reflections are slightly blurred by the thickness of the atmosphere. Lantern light travels across this shelf clearly, creating long streaks of color that stretch far into the distance. Some parts of the shelf rise into curved formations, creating natural slopes that direct the light in specific patterns. Scattered across this shelf are several clusters of wide, bowl-like depressions. Unlike earlier bowls, these ones are dry and lined with thin, fibrous structures that react to lantern light instantly. When exposed, the fibers glow intensely along their tips, forming neat rings around each bowl. These rings fade gradually, but remain visible long after the lantern creatures pass. Continuing onward reveals a network of deep cracks running in parallel lines. These cracks emit faint, stored glow from below, pulsing in slow, steady intervals. The ground vibrates slightly around them, so subtle that the motion is almost unnoticeable unless you stand still. When lantern creatures drift low, the vibrations intensify just enough to make the crack edges shift slightly, suggesting some deeper system reacts directly to atmospheric energy. Beyond the crack network lies a wide stretch of tall, pillar-like structures packed closely together. Each pillar has semi-transparent surfaces that carry faint internal glow. The pillars lean slightly toward the direction of the strongest lantern pulses, adjusting gradually as the sky changes. At times, when lanterns come close, the pillars brighten from the base upward, sending slow pulses of illumination along their heights. Moving between the pillars, the air becomes warmer and more humid. Soft vapor drifts through the gaps, carrying hints of the metallic sweet scent that permeates many regions on this world. The pillars react to movement by brightening slightly as you pass, then fading back to neutral glow once you move beyond their range. The pillar forest eventually transitions to another open plateau. This plateau is smoother and more uniform, covered in thin sheets of organic material that lie flat across the surface. When lantern light brightens, each sheet illuminates from within, creating a mosaic of connected glowing tiles across the landscape. The sheets dim slowly once the pulse fades, holding on to a soft afterglow that lingers far longer than anything in the trough behind you. At the far end of the plateau, lantern creatures gather in dense clusters again, preparing to drift overhead. Their glow spreads across the landscape, triggering the next sequence of reactions as the world below adjusts itself to the changing colors. The environment settles into another quiet phase, waiting for the next long wave of illumination. The plateau ahead begins to slope downward again, its glowing sheets giving way to more textured terrain. Thin, branching structures emerge from the surface, stretching outward like natural conduits. They form a wide network of shallow lines that extend for kilometers, each line carrying a faint glow that strengthens when lantern creatures move overhead. The glow travels through the branches in smooth waves, distributing light evenly across the landscape. As the slope continues, the ground becomes firmer, transitioning into a flat plain covered in tightly pressed layers of organic film. These layers react to lantern light by shifting color slowly, not in flashes. When lanterns brighten, the film deepens into richer tones. When the sky dims, it settles into muted shades. Tiny creatures with elongated bodies move across the film, trailing faint glows that linger briefly before fading. Near the center of this plane, clusters of low, tubular openings emerge. The openings are arranged in circular patterns, each ring containing dozens of evenly spaced vents. These vents release thin threads of warm vapor that rise only a few centimeters before dispersing. When lantern light pulses strongly, the vapor thickens and gains color, creating soft, spreading patches over the plane. Continuing forward, the plane gives way to a region filled with large, overlapping panels. Each panel is several meters wide and rests atop layered supports. The panels shift subtly, adjusting their angles as lantern creatures drift overhead. When the panels tilt, they reflect light downward into narrow gaps between them, illuminating compact ecosystems hidden underneath. Tiny gliding organisms move through these gaps, their bodies glowing faintly like moving embers. Passing through the panel region leads to a broad valley lined with tall, conical formations. These cones stand in tight rows, each one connected to its neighbor through thin organic strands that stretch across the valley. The strands carry steady internal glow, forming faint lines of light that crisscross the landscape. When lanterns pulse brightly, the cones brighten along specific seams, sending waves of illumination into the connecting strands. Deeper into the valley, these cones become taller and more complex. Their surfaces shift texture depending on the light, smooth during dim intervals and patterned during bright cycles. Some cones emit low vibrations that spread through the valley floor like a soft hum. When multiple cones activate at once, the hum grows stronger, creating a subtle resonance. At the end of the valley, the landscape rises into a long ridge lined with ribbed growths. Each rib catches lantern light and glows along its length. When lanterns drift lower, the ribs brighten in synchronized waves. When lanterns rise higher into the sky, the ribs soften into dimmer tones. The ridge's surface is uneven but firm, allowing easy traversal despite the dense organic structures. Beyond the ridge, the world opens into a wide basin filled with reflective fog. The fog here differs from earlier versions. It is thinner but more reactive, responding instantly to lantern pulses. When the glow intensifies, the fog brightens sharply, filling the basin with a uniform light. When the glow fades, the fog dims quickly, revealing more details of the ground beneath. Descending into the basin reveals strange mound-like formations. Each mound is hollow with a vented top. The vents release steady flows of cool vapor that mix with the fog above. When lantern creatures drift overhead, the vapor changes color, creating layered waves of illumination that rise through the basin. Smaller organisms gather near the vents, arranging themselves in spirals that match the flow of vapor. Their bodies glow faintly during strong lantern pulses. Moving deeper into the basin furthers the variety. Tall arches grown from flexible organic beams form natural corridors. Their surfaces react to light in unique ways, brightening quickly then dimming slowly, as though storing part of the glow. Some arches are coated with a fine dust that captures ambient illumination and holds onto it for long periods. When disturbed, this dust falls gently, glowing brightly before settling. Past the arches, the basin floor transitions again into wide sheets of shimmering material. Each sheet contains subtle grooves that guide the movement of thin, luminous liquids flowing across the surface. These liquids shift color based on lantern activity, creating expanding circles of brightness that drift outward until they meet the edges of the sheets. When the circles collide with other flow lines, the patterns merge smoothly, forming new paths. At the far end of the basin, the terrain rises into stepped terraces. These terraces are lined with tall, stalk-like organisms that sway in slow cycles. Their surfaces are coated in thick, translucent skin that holds light inside it, giving them a steady internal glow. When lantern creatures pass overhead, the stalks brighten in alternating patterns, creating a pulsing, wave-like effect moving across the terraces. Ascending the terraces leads to a narrow plateau dotted with dome-shaped growths. These domes have smooth, almost glassy surfaces. They store lantern light throughout the day, releasing it during dim intervals as soft, lingering glows. Smaller creatures nest inside shallow openings on the dome's sides. Their bodies pulse faintly as they move, matching the glow cycles around them. Near the edges of the plateau, thin fissures open into caverns illuminated by reflective surfaces. These cavern walls contain embedded veins of bioluminescent material that glow in stable patterns rather than reacting to the lanterns above. The caverns are warmer than the surrounding plateau, likely due to deeper biological systems beneath the ground. Thin streams of warmed air rise from the openings, carrying faint glowing dust that drifts upward before dispersing. Beyond the plateau, the landscape slopes downward into a wide channel filled with complex structures. These structures resemble enormous flakes stacked in spiraling layers. Each flake reacts differently to lantern light, producing varying tones of illumination. When lantern creatures drift overhead in coordinated groups, the flakes illuminate in synchronized ripples that travel across the channel like rolling waves. Moving across the flakes reveals a faint, collective hum beneath the surface, steady and low, responding slowly to lantern changes. It isn't linked to any single structure. It appears to be an emergent sound produced by the entire region. Past the flake formations, the terrain broadens into a calm, evenly lit stretch. Lantern creatures gather on the horizon, preparing another slow drift across the sky. Their glow spills across the basin and terraces, bringing the next sequence of environmental reactions into motion. The world waits quietly for the shift as the colors build again overhead. The evenly lit stretch ahead gradually transitions into a zone marked by long, low ridges. These ridges run parallel for great distances, forming natural lanes across the landscape. Their surfaces are composed of tightly bound fibers that absorb lantern light deeply rather than reflecting it. When lantern creatures drift overhead, the ridges respond by releasing faint internal glow along thin seams, creating narrow streaks of light that travel the length of each ridge in slow waves. Between the ridges, the ground sinks into elongated troughs filled with a fluid mist that clings close to the surface. The mist here is thicker than earlier basins, hugging the ground in a stable layer. Whenever lantern light brightens, faint arcs of color flicker within the mist. These arcs follow the troughs, moving like slow currents. Occasionally, small organisms glide just above the mist, their bodies glowing faintly as they skim the surface, stirring the vapor into swirling patterns before settling again. As the lanes stretch onward, the ridges begin to break into broader formations resembling massive shelves. These shelves rise at gradual angles, creating tiered steps across the land. Each shelf is lined with long, shallow depressions filled with thin, reflective liquids. When lantern light reaches them, the liquids brighten instantly, producing clean reflections of the drifting organisms overhead. When the lanterns pulse, the reflections ripple, sending faint waves of color across the surface of the shelves. Climbing the shelves reveals that their edges are lined with thin strands of flexible growth. These strands respond to lantern light with immediate reactions, brightening sharply during strong pulses, then dimming quickly. When touched, they bend and release short bursts of stored illumination, creating flickers that travel along their lengths before fading. At the top of the shelf system, the terrain levels out into a wide plateau dominated by tall columns of woven, translucent material. These columns rise in clusters, their internal structures visible through the semi-clear surfaces. Lantern light sinks into the columns and travels up their interiors, illuminating the branching channels. When multiple lantern creatures drift overhead in coordinated formations, the columns glow from their bases upward in synchronized pulses. Around the bases of the columns, circular platforms contain dense patches of compact glowing vegetation. Each patch emits a steady light that deepens or fades depending on lantern intensity. Small, drone-like organisms with spinning appendages hover near the patches, absorbing energy from the vegetation before drifting to nearby columns to release it. Their movements form predictable loops, syncing loosely with the lantern pulses. Past the columns, a long descending slope opens into a shallow valley lined with tall, curved beams. These beams arch upward from the ground in sweeping shapes and meet high overhead, forming half-closed tunnels. Lantern light moves through the tunnels in focused paths, bouncing between the curved surfaces and highlighting the interior structures. When lantern creatures drift low, the beams respond by vibrating slightly, which produces thin threads of sound that rise and fall with the changes in the sky. The ground beneath the beams is covered in a network of small, tightly packed crystal fragments. These fragments catch stray lantern light and break it into sharp, precise beams that flicker between the tunnel walls. The fragments are stable, not shifting under weight, and they maintain a soft glow even during long, dim stretches. Occasionally, small creatures scuttle between the crystals, their bodies almost blending with the ground as they move. As the valley opens, the beams spread apart, revealing a series of natural terraces extending downward. Each terrace contains wide basins filled with luminous dust. This dust is extremely reactive, brightening sharply when disturbed. When lantern creatures pulse, the terraces light up in staggered sequences, creating long chains of illumination that travel down the slope like flowing signals. Between each terrace, narrow channels carry thin streams of glowing vapor. This vapor travels predictably, following paths carved through the organic terrain. When lanterns drift overhead, the vapor brightens and rises slightly, forming vertical curtains of soft color that drift slowly before settling back into the channels. Reaching the base of the terraces leads to a long, hollowed region that resembles a natural amphitheater. The walls are lined with layered organic plates, each plate capable of storing large amounts of light. When lantern creatures drift close, the plates brighten from the bottom upward, creating rising wave-like illumination along the curved walls. When lanterns drift away, the plates release their stored glow slowly, filling the region with a lingering dim light. In the center of the amphitheater, a circular depression contains a pool of dense liquid. The liquid glows even without direct lantern illumination, its surface shifting with internal currents. When lantern pulses reach the amphitheater, the pool intensifies in brightness, sending thin beams of colored light upward through the central opening of the structure. These beams travel high into the sky, scattering into the thicker atmosphere. Clusters of rounded organisms surround the pool. Their bodies expand and contract in steady cycles that sync with the brightness of the liquid. When the lantern creatures brighten overhead, the organisms glow intensely and release faint vapor through small vents along their sides. When the glow fades, they shrink back to their softer shapes and return to a dull illumination. Past the amphitheater, another passage opens, leading to tall banks of rigid growth shaped like thick blades. These blades rise at sharp angles and interlock at their tops, forming narrow canopies. Lantern light strikes the edges of the blades, causing sharp lines of illumination to run down their lengths. When a lantern pulse passes over, the blades shift subtly, realigning themselves as the light changes direction. The passage leads onward into a deeper channel filled with soft, rising fog. The fog here is denser, carrying suspended particles that glow faintly even in the absence of lantern creatures. When overhead glow intensifies, the particles brighten and move upward, forming pillars of light that drift upward in slow columns. As the glow fades, the particles fall back into the channel, restoring the soft, even haze. Toward the far side of the channel, large conical towers rise from the ground. Each tower is lined with branching internal channels that glow in patterns matching the lanterns above. When lantern creatures drift lower, the towers widen slightly at their bases, releasing warm air that carries glowing particles upward. These ascending columns merge with the fog, amplifying the glow throughout the channel. Climbing out of the channel leads into another expansive plateau, this one containing a wide scattering of tall, segmented growths. Each segment glows independently, responding to both ambient light and pressure changes. When lantern pulses sweep across the plateau, the segments brighten in complex sequences, producing rippling patterns that travel across the entire field. Ahead, another gathering of lantern creatures approaches from the horizon, preparing the region for another large-scale shift. The landscape pauses once more, adjusting to the slow, steady cycle of illumination drifting across the sky. The next wave of lantern creatures drifts closer, spreading their glow across the plateau full of segmented growths. As the light strengthens, each segment brightens along its edges, forming thin outlines that pulse in timed sequences. The pulses travel from one segment to the next, cascading outward in expanding circles that roll across the plateau. When the lanterns ease their brightness, the lines fade and settle back into their dull internal glow. Beyond this illuminated field, the landscape drops into a wide basin filled with tall, pliable structures. These structures resemble narrow ribbons rising from the ground, each standing several meters high. Their surfaces bend in smooth rolls whenever the lantern creatures pass directly overhead, following the shifts in atmospheric pressure created by the floating organisms. The ribbons carry faint internal glow, strongest at their bases and weakest near their tips. Between the ribbons, the ground is coated in thick, spongy growth that compresses noticeably underfoot. When compressed, the growth emits tiny bursts of colored particles that rise a short distance before dissolving. These bursts are brightest during lantern pulses and nearly invisible during dim stretches, giving the basin a shifting, speckled appearance. As the basin widens, broad pools of luminous fluid begin appearing. These pools are shallow but stretch across large patches of terrain. Their surfaces behave like flexible membranes, sinking slightly when touched. Lantern creatures drifting overhead cause the pools to brighten evenly, creating uniform sheets of color across the ground. During stronger pulses, the fluid develops slow-moving waves that travel toward the edges, glowing intensely along the crests before settling again. At the far side of the basin, the ground rises into a series of tall terraces. Each terrace holds long rows of thin stake-like formations. These stakes stand upright and vibrate faintly when lantern creatures move overhead. The vibrations spread through the rows in staggered patterns. When the lantern glow is intense, the stakes glow along their entire length. During dim intervals, only their bases remain illuminated. Climbing the terraces leads into a shallow canyon lined with layered walls. The walls contain embedded translucent plates that react to lantern light with immediate brightness. When light passes over them, the plates intensify in clean, steady illumination, holding the glow for several minutes before fading. Smaller plates open and close in slow cycles, revealing deeper layers of stored color that pulse softly. In the canyon floor, thin channels carry narrow streams of viscous liquid that glow steadily. When the lantern creatures pulse, the liquid brightens, sending long ripples through the channels. The glow travels upward along the canyon walls as it reflects across the surfaces, bathing the entire corridor in shifting light. Small, agile creatures move across the canyon walls. They have long, thin appendages that allow them to cling tightly to the layered plates. Their bodies glow faintly, but intensify sharply when exposed to direct lantern pulses. They move carefully, navigating the walls by following brighter seams of light. Exiting the canyon leads into a wide open expanse covered with tall, rod-like growths spaced evenly apart. These rods are rigid and carry small circular openings along their sides. When lantern light strengthens, the openings flare in bright rings, emitting thin streams of warm air. The streams rise into the sky, reacting to the drifting particles released by lantern creatures above. When the glow fades, the rods close their openings and settle into a muted state. The expanse eventually descends into another basin, this one filled with tall, overlapping plates arranged almost like natural shingles. The plates tilt slightly during strong lantern pulses, creating large reflective surfaces that catch and scatter the light across the valley. The scattered glow produces moving patterns on the ground, forming long arcs that drift in response to lantern movements. Between the plates, deep pockets of fog collect and hold to the terrain. This fog is denser than the earlier layers, carrying more internal glow. When lantern creatures drift overhead, the fog lights up from within, creating bright, diffused color that rises in soft plumes. The plumes drift through gaps between the plates, forming slow-moving streams over the basin. Moving through the basin reveals clusters of tall, branched structures similar to coral, but made from soft organic material. These structures sway gently, even without wind, responding instead to faint vibrations in the air. When lantern pulses are strong, the branches brighten along their tips, sending cascades of color down their lengths. Smaller organisms nest within the branches, absorbing glow from the tips and carrying it into the basin floor. At the far end of the basin, the land rises sharply into a ridge of tall pillars. These pillars are thick at the base and taper as they rise, reaching high into the air. Their surfaces are patterned with faint, geometric channels that hold light for long periods. When lantern creatures drift overhead in bright clusters, the pillars absorb most of the glow and release it gradually over several minutes. During dim intervals, the pillars become the primary source of illumination, glowing steadily enough to light the surrounding region. Beyond the ridge, the terrain spreads into a massive open plain. This plain is covered in thin, flexible sheets that extend for kilometers, each one carrying faint internal glow. When lantern creatures shift overhead, waves of light travel through these sheets, moving in long rippling motions that drift toward the horizon. The sheets respond slowly, creating delayed waves that continue long after the sky transitions into a different color. As you move across the plain, the ground begins to slope downward again, leading into a region dominated by deep, wide channels filled with slow-moving vapor. The vapor glows softly and shifts in color with consistent timing. Thin filaments grow along the channel edges, capturing particles from the vapor and glowing faintly. Lantern pulses cause the filaments to flare briefly, casting bright lines across the channel walls. Crossing the channel leads into a region where tall, arch-like structures rise from the ground in groups. These arches link together in overlapping patterns that form long tunnels. Lantern light passes through the arches cleanly, illuminating the interiors in long stretches of steady color. When lantern creatures come close, the arches tilt slightly, adjusting their angles to maximize the glow they receive. Past the arches, the land flattens into another broad plateau filled with vast reflective fields. These fields are smoother than any seen so far, reacting to lantern light with perfect clarity. When a lantern creature drifts overhead, its reflection travels across the ground as sharply as if mirrored on water. When multiple lanterns cross paths, their overlapping reflections create layered patterns of color across the plateau. Small creatures glide across the reflective surface, propelled by smooth, silent motions. Their bodies glow faintly, and they leave thin trails of light behind them that disappear within seconds. The trails overlap with reflections from the sky above, creating small, shifting intersections of glow. Towards the far end of the reflective plateau, the terrain transitions into a region filled with sharp, crystalline growths. Each growth is tall and rigid, with facets that catch lantern light at different angles. When lantern pulses strengthen, the crystals refract the light into thousands of small beams that scatter across the ground. The effect creates a field of moving points of illumination, drifting like airborne markers across the terrain. Beyond the crystal field, the world begins to quiet again. The lantern creatures above drift into looser patterns, their glow spreading evenly across the landscape rather than producing sharp waves of light. Every structure, formation and organism below settles into slow, predictable cycles of brightness and dimness, all tied to the steady movement overhead. As the glow softens, the entire world enters one of its calmer phases. The colors fade into muted tones, the air thickens with gentle warmth, and the landscape holds its stored light without rushing to release it. The planet settles once more into its long drifting equilibrium, waiting for the next wave of lantern creatures to reshape its colors all over again.